help them recognize that they've been looking for a job. They're not looking for a handout. They're bringing value and exchanging value in the work.
Welcome back to this episode on How to Get a Job podcast. Today I have Neil Danzger with me, and he is a founder and career consultant at Danzler Group. Neil, welcome. How are you doing today?
Terrific. And yourself, Daniel?
I am doing excellent. I'm super excited about this conversation because we're going to talk about a point of view that we haven't really covered in all 270 plus episodes of this podcast, believe it or not. And that is the perspective of how parents can help their children when they're in college and how they can support them in the job search, but also how can children talk and communicate with their parents so that they can support them in the job search process. Because here's the thing, both your parents and yourself want you to be successful in your career. And so by working together and knowing how to work together, I think it's going to be very, very helpful. But Neil, how is it going with you? And tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Things are going well. I coach and advise young adults, meaning college students, grads, and young professionals, in how to land great jobs and internships. I do it from the perspective of a hiring manager, since I ran HR for a financial technology company that I co-founded for 10 years. So I have the perspective of the person who is engaging with candidates and such. And it's a real personal passion of mine to help young adults launch successfully. And you're right, parents want it to happen, the young adults want it to happen. And I have 4 young adults myself, ranging from 21 to 26, and they are well on their way and launching. And I know how tricky it can be, that relationship and interaction between parent and child.
Yeah, and I really think through, right, as like, if your parents help pay for your college, how much they're investing both financially and emotionally on it. And they obviously want to make sure that their investment is paid off. They want you to be happy and make sure that you're successful and essentially get you off their payroll. And so I can see how that could be really, how they can be so invested into it and how they're going to want success. So in your perspective, how can a parent support a job seeker in this journey?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'd say they're invested. Before I tell you about that, they're invested in 3 ways. One is the financial investment they made in college and seeing that pay off, and reducing the strain on their own budgets and financial lives in terms of their kids launching versus having to support them, live at home for things like that. And then there's also the sort of the psychic investment that they have in seeing them succeed, and call it a pride element, and a true from the heart love element, that they want to see them succeed in life. So in terms of how they can help them, I think there are a couple of principles. One, everything has to come out of love and not out of pride and strictly financial things. These are your offspring, and you have to nurture them, but not coddle them. And that's a really difficult thing to do. So you need to give them the tools to succeed. And some of the tools you've probably given them, like sending them off to college. But some of the additional tools to offer them are the means to go ahead and find a job. And I'm not trying to be self-serving or talk my own book, if you will. But often young adults through the college experience have access to career centers and such, but those are more reactive services rather than proactive. And many young adults find it really helpful to have some help in the process of job search. It is a true skill and methodology, and it's not necessarily taught as a course within school. So they do need exposure to that in one way or another.
No, absolutely. I think a lot about the stress that can, happen within the relationship of the parents and the children once their children have graduated college and they're looking for the job, and their parents obviously want them to get a job as soon as possible. And they ultimately, and I wonder what is the right amount of pressure that a parent should be putting on to the child. And I get, I'm thinking through it as I ask that it would depend in a lot of different variables. But what is your advice? How can a parent to what extent should a parent be supporting the children? Should they be applying for jobs for them? Should they be writing cover letters for them? They can't go to the interview for them, not that I know of.
Right. No, I mean, parents can often take too heavy a hand. Some parents engage with professors and things like that, and I'm all against helicoptering or bulldozing kinds of parents. So they need to take a lighter touch. They need to be genuinely supportive, and they need to pick the times, and this is really important, about when to have the conversation. And it's not that every time around the dinner table is, so how's the job search going? And a kind of an attack, if you will, or every phone call if they're living away from home. It shouldn't be an inquisition. And I think it makes sense to perhaps schedule time to have the conversation and to be encouraging. In terms of the help they can give them, the parents' personal network is in many cases extremely
Yeah.
valuable to the young adult. That's not the case for every young adult, but many times aunts and uncles and parents, business associates, and people in the community that they've had either know or some tangential exposure to are great sources for uncovering jobs. And to your point about parents shouldn't write the cover letter or they can't take the interview, but I've seen all too many times and heard from many clients that the parents are saying, "Give me your resume, I'll shoot it off to my friend and see if they know of any jobs." And that couldn't be further from the best process to make things happen. And by that I mean that the parents should open their network and relationships in a way that the parent is comfortable, but they really want to let the young adult take control of the process so that the young adult can be themselves, handle follow up, and be engaging and develop a true relationship with the person. And it's not a matter of, hey, do you know of any jobs for little Tommy? But rather, hey, you're in the trading area at Merrill Lynch. Tommy's kind of interested in that. Would you be open to him reaching out to you and having a Zoom with you? So that's the kind of help. It shouldn't be do it for them, but be helpful to them.
You know, some of the things you mentioned there are so good and so important, because I even think of myself as when I was a hiring manager and I would get referrals. If a parent were to, like, be the helicopter parents, be very involved, and they're using their personal connections to not only help their children get the jobs, but they're pushing that on their relationship, I think that actually looks negative upon their son. Like, there's no soft skills or leadership skills. And when the children are the ones that are actually sending the email, after the parents have checked on and said, is it okay if my son reaches out to you, right? That actually is a better approach. And you mentioned that. I think that shows more leadership, more so the soft skills, than if the mom or the dad did all the work, in a sense, because I actually think you're hurting the chances of your son doing it, because if you've been doing that, like, you're going through the interview process. Those interactions are part of the interview process.
Right, right. It's simply making the connection, and the young adult has to build the relationship. And it's often more than a one and done. It's having that talk and then following up days or weeks later with, hey, this is an interesting article on algorithmic trading I found. So to be their own person and begin their own process of getting to know someone over time.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is it's the personal network, the parents' network is the great starting
Yeah.
point for job search. And it's a wonderful supplement to the applications that people are going to do. They're going to go online. They're going to see, oh, what's going on at Merrill Lynch? And hey, I know someone, I've talked to someone at Merrill Lynch. Instead of lobbing your application in, as the 678th on the pile, you can have a real advocate within the firm.
Yeah, no, I love that. Now let's talk about the other extreme, right? So we were just mentioning about the helicopter bulldozing parent, but what about the other extreme, when you have a parent who's not involved, doesn't check in, like, how can a student about to graduate start that conversation with their parent, who and how can they can ask, what should they be asking for support, um in that case?
Yeah, and You raise an interesting issue for the parent who is too light touch. They will often, I've seen many cases where they will put their uh, new graduate up in an apartment in New York City, give them the credit card and things like that. And they're so light touch that this can go on for months or years. And those grads who have been privileged, if you will, take longer to launch than many, and they kind of put themselves behind the eight ball because when you have a lot of time that's unaccounted for and you haven't used it for personal development and enrichment and experiences, it's going to make the employer say, "Hey, what this kid was sitting on the couch watching Netflix, is this really the person I want to bring onto my firm?" So that light touch, it can be really dangerous. And I would add also, there are some parents that do that light touch because they're really not equipped to help their young adult. And I will have to say that some parents, particularly physicians, people in the medical area, where they haven't had more of the classic commercial life, if you will, moving jobs, interviewing. It tends to be a lower turnover kind of business, and also attorneys. That's kind of a tracked career that's a little different than your standard job search. So they're often staying back, and they can't help their kids either with the process or knowing about industries that are interesting to them, meaning they're not so big up on tech firms or financial institutions or other digital media things that are where the jobs are, but they're, because of their career path, they're not really connected.
Such interesting and such a good point on like doctors and lawyers might not know exactly how it feels to go into the engineering or business side of those professions where, for doctors, the way that they apply in the interview process and even the supply and demand of
The
doctors,
match.
yeah, the matching
Yeah,
side of it, it's so different. um you know what I found is like, if you graduate and you're looking for a job, and maybe you're, to your point, are privileged where your parents are paying for your expenses, you need to have built discipline, and you need to treat finding a job your full-time job. you know Spend 8 hours a day going through looking for what jobs are available, networking, applying, practicing interviews, building some sort of skill that is required, maybe this skill gap that you can work on, and having that discipline. So as a parent, I would say, like, if you are, maybe you have a son or a daughter that graduated and they're on your payroll, they're either moved in with you or they're living in an apartment that you're paying for. I would say put them on, like, make sure that they're on a schedule, that they are treating finding a job a full-time job. Give them a deadline, because I do see it on the end of the side, like the opposite side of where I work with a lot more is international students who they have a deadline. They have 90 days to get a job from when they graduate, and most of them do get a job. Why do they get a job? Is because the sense of urgency that they have, right? It's not even a money issue at this point. It is 90 days. If I don't have a job, I have to leave the country. My visa expired. I can't work here. And so that deadline, that pressure actually works in their favor in that end right now. Those 90 days are very, very stressful. But and I think you can put that level of, not the same level of pressure, but some sort of pressure and requirements saying, hey, no problem. I will pay for your rent. I will pay for your expenses for 3 months. You got 3 months. After that, it's on you. You're gonna have to take some credit card debt. You're gonna have to put yourself out of this, and put that pressure and say 8 hours a day. How many places you're applying? How are you networking? And at that point, maybe even hire a professional like you that specializes in those cases.
right. I mean, in practical terms, it's hard to give a deadline, if you will. Um, you really need to be encouraging. And well, it's hard to give a deadline, but it's easier to say these resources last for so long, if you will, meaning not making it so sort of cushy or easier on them. Like, my expectation is you will launch, and you don't have, a New York apartment is not going to work.
Yeah.
I'm not going to fund that. So you basically have to set the ground rules and set it early. Don't do it
Yes.
at graduation. Do it, like, to start talking about it in middle school, about expectations. Like, I expect all of you to fly. And I'm not going to let you stumble and fail, but I'm also not going to make it very easy and cushy for you.
Yeah.
And in terms, so you one approach is make a hard deadline. Another is sort of is to try to take the coach's approach as a parent, which is, so how would how do you think you'll like living with me and mom in our home in a place that's not near the city, so you're going to be kind of isolated and I don't have a car for you. How is that going to, like, how do you envision that playing out? Asking those questions and helping them come to their conclusion, like, that wouldn't be so good. So, and but parents don't have that coach's manner to be inquisitive. Parents, and I see this, they dictate and say you should do this and you're going to do that and it will be by then, instead of that the inquisitiveness that a coach has to help people come to their own
Yeah.
conclusions and solve their own problems, as I'm sure you could appreciate.
Yeah, and I also think I remember working. So earlier when I started this coaching business, right? I was one of my mentors was the guy who wrote the book, one of the biggest books on this field. And we were grabbing coffee. He actually happens to live in Orlando, uh, and he was talking to me about how he was having struggling to have his daughter listen to his advice on how to get ready, how to find internships earlier on. The earlier you find internships, like kind of like being proactive about the job search process, even though they were like a sophomore or junior at that time that we were having coffee. And he asked me, he's like, hey, can you mentor my daughter? And I'm like, hey, you wrote the book on this. I'm just starting out. Like, what? And he goes like, well, the reason is she sees me as a dad, right? She does not going to listen to me the same way that she would listen to you. And I think that's a really learning lesson of saying like, hey, like you might have a very successful career as a parent. Like you might have the job that your son or daughter ultimately want to strive for in some cases. But the advice that you come in, like children sometimes listen more to an outside expert than they would to their own mom and dad. And so I think that's where, if your parents have the resources, working with a career coach like yourself, Neil, might be the best, because it actually will release some of that tension that might be caused when you have a father and a daughter, or a father and a son, or vice versa, mom and right, create that tension that just naturally creates when you're like, you need to get a job, you need to get on my payroll. And then the daughter or the son are complaining. It's like, you're not supportive, you don't believe in me. And it just creates so much tension.
Right. Parents, I know firsthand, kids don't want to hear it from their parents. Even the best equipped parents at it. It's the old, the cobbler's kids, shoemakers, kids in their shoes kind of
Yeah.
thing. An independent third party, an objective third party, is really helpful here. And I create an atmosphere of confidentiality and a safe space. So I will say, very often parents come to me, I have an initial conversation with them, and they say they're supportive of providing help to their young adult. Then I have a conversation with the young adult, because I would never attempt to work with someone who is rebellious and
Sure.
not interested in doing it. So it's a two-step kind of buy-in to the process. But then once I start working with the young adult, the parents never hear from me again.
Yeah.
There's no check-in, status reports, notes, things like that. Unless if the young adult wants me to speak to their parent for one reason or another, I will. But it is me and the client from that point forward, and they can share things like, I really get nervous during interviews.
Mm.
I'm really not comfortable reaching out to people. There's a lot of anxiety, as you know, I'm sure you know, among young adults in for so many reasons, and I think social media tops tops the list of what causes young adults to be uncomfortable. They see the best lives of their friends on Instagram. Look, I just got in early
Yeah.
acceptance, and they get all freaked out, and everyone's getting jobs but me, and it can create a downward spiral. So what I try to do is build them up and be positive and reinforce things, the sort of the opposite of the social media effect. And I help them recognize that they've been looking for a job. They're not looking for a handout. They're bringing value and exchanging value in the
Yeah.
workplace, and they have a lot to offer, and technically, socially, etc., culturally. So be proud of what you can offer and go in on an equal footing, not bowing down to the almighty employer. And the bit about this, the third party, the neutral third party, we see it in driving instruction.
Mm.
Everyone has their kids go out for driving school, and they may also, of course, help them, but together. But often a driving instructor is involved, and college admissions. There are advisors that help with that process, both because they know how to do it and because they diffuse some of the tension between the parent and the young adult.
No, no, it makes so much sense. Why having a third party involved it's just going to allow the relationship to be stronger, which is the most important thing, is the relationship between the parents and the children, and having a third party expert who's gone through this route, right? The parents a lot of times are telling them their experience on how to get a job when they got a job 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago versus and things have changed. They weren't using LinkedIn, Monster, and Indeed or Handshake, and so things have definitely changed. So, Neil, this has been awesome. If there is a student that is looking to kind of get the support, maybe that they're like, hey, maybe I should reach out to my parents to talk to help pay for this as a way to support. Or if you're a parent listening to this and you want to learn more about Neil and his services, what is the best way to get connected with you or get in contact with you?
Sure, certainly danzgergroup.com is my website. That's danger with a Z right in the middle, group.com, or my LinkedIn profile, Neil Danzger. There aren't that many on LinkedIn. I'm kind of fortunate in that respect, and always happy to have a complimentary consultation, a strategy session to get to know the parent, the young adult. And I work with people in a couple of ways. Certainly, one-on-one coaching is a mainstay, but I'm also beginning to offer group coaching, live online classes, and I'm very excited about that. So it can be delivered multiple ways, and I do share a lot of great content on LinkedIn and a weekly newsletter. So those are the ways to get to know me.
Amazing, amazing. So we'll definitely put all your LinkedIn and your website on the show notes. So if you are interested in learning more about Neo and connecting with them, you can just click the links below. Neo, thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone listening, thank you so much for coming to this episode of the podcast. All right, so in today's rant, I am going to talk about how you make finding a job your full-time job. If you've already graduated and you have nothing going on and you're just waiting to get a call back so that you can start your full-time job, and you're like, hey, I graduated, I don't have a job going on, what should I do with my time? Here is my advice to you. I believe that you should take finding a job seriously and make it your full-time job. Make it a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. job. Just like if you go in for a job, build a routine. Don't get lazy and don't get sucked into the comfortables of your couch or bed and watch unlimited Netflix. Instead, wake up early, go to the gym before, set from 8 to 10 a.m. to review what new job openings are out there. Set time to network, set time to apply to jobs properly, tweaking your resume, doing research on the companies before you apply, creating a cover letter, finding 5 to 10 people per job that you apply to network with on LinkedIn and start the conversation to get you visibility. Create LinkedIn content, right? Spend 3 to 4 hours sharpening the skills that you need for the job so that you can close the skill gap that you might have, building those technicals and soft skills that are required. Use that time to build and get new certifications that you think might holding you back. Use that time to do mock interviews. Use that time to network with other people who are looking for jobs, or engaging and commenting on LinkedIn on the post of other individuals. The key is that you're being proactive, not reactive. The key is that you're not just waiting for people to reach out to you, that you're not just waiting to get an email to invite you to an interview while you watch Netflix. You need to keep yourself busy for anything else, for your mindset. If not, you're going to put yourself into massive anxiety and depression. And you want to avoid that, because once you started doubting yourself, once you start feeling anxious and depressed, the harder it's going to be for you to snap out of it. And if you do get to call to an interview, and when you will get called to an interview, because it will eventually happen if you apply to enough places, you're going to be doubting yourself, and that's going to translate into your interview and is going to make it even harder for you to get the job. So all I am saying is this: be proactive, not reactive. Set yourself a schedule. Treat it like a full-time job. Put blocks of times in your calendar. Spend 2 hours networking. Spend 2 hours looking for new opportunities and customizing your application and applying. Spend some 3 to 4 hours building new skill sets, getting certifications. Spend time engaging, going to networking events, going to meetup events, asking your current network if they can help you get a job. But the key is to stay busy. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. And if you're a job seeker or a college student looking for a job and want to learn how we can help you, I actually want to invite you to one of our workshops. Go to our website at opni.co and register for our next live workshop so that you can see what working with us is all about. Have an amazing day and catch you guys later.